For more, Scott Steinburg, futurist for a KeynoteSpeaker.com, now joins us for more on this story on Facebook that seems to continue to develop. Let me first start to ask you, how big of a deal is this hacking of Facebook?
Well, according to Facebook, it's not been that largely impacted by the hack. But from a consumer perspective, you have to wonder, it points to impending potential breaches in security. And the issue is, as more and more of our data and more of our activity goes online and to social networks, we have to be more and more concerned about possible points of failure and security breaches.
When you mean failures, do you mean globally? Are there specific locations that perhaps might be more vulnerable than others?
Well, each network has its own different nodes and specific areas where it can be accessed. But I think on a global scale, the issue is that any data that you can place online, the more and more we move onto social networks in the cloud, the more and more potential ways there is for your data to be compromised. So you have to be very careful about the personal information you're putting out there and realize that anything, no matter how private you think it is, that's shared online can in fact become public as a result of hackers or other security breaches.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think everyone knows that everything that goes on these Facebooks and LinkedIn is really all public information. But for the millions and millions of users, whether you're in China or the US, how easy is it for someone to hack into our social media account, to log in and pretend that you're Philip Yen or you're Scott and change things on the account? Is it as easy as some people make it out to be, or is it much harder?
Well, in many ways, it's easier and it's harder. As long as you have a secure password and you're very careful about what you're clicking on, then you don't have as much to worry about. You see, the big issue comes when you start clicking on links where you don't know where they lead, or interacting with other individuals whose actions you may not be able to monitor, and they wind up sharing things, you wind up clicking on them, or you're tagged in a post, for example, that you don't know, and you wind up clicking on that link and it takes you somewhere. As long as you have a secure password, in most cases, 99% of the time, you'll be all right. But the bigger issue is, from an overarching perspective, if you have a breach at the network level, at the actual company, Facebook itself, and any times this can occur based on human error, no matter how secure the systems, then the issue is that credit card information, personal details can be compromised.
Well, I wanted to ask this because this is a legitimate question, I think, is that how do you know if you're even hacked? I mean, how do you know if someone's stolen your identity? Because you wouldn't know it until it's far too late. Am I right about that?
Well, it depends how often you log in. Certainly, if you try and log in and you're not getting any response, your password appears to have changed or blocked, and you're not monitoring it, that's when you have an issue. But if you are actively monitoring, it's very quick to be able to decide if you have been hacked or not, because oftentimes friends will let you know you'll be engaging in strange activity. Oftentimes spammers will clickjack and take control of your account and then wind up putting more links out that will lead to more fraudulent activity, getting your friends involved. So oftentimes you'll hear very quickly. It's when you're very removed from the situation and you're not paying attention to your credit card bill, for example, or logging in for quite some time, that's when it becomes a problem.
Scott, we're in the media business, so that means everyone's on these things all the time. So what advice do you have for all of us that's using these different websites to protect ourselves? Should you change passwords every couple of months? Should you have a more complicated password?
Yeah, well, a big piece of the puzzle, as you said, having a secure password, making sure it's not a dictionary term that you'd commonly find, should be letters, numbers, characters like exclamation points, making sure you're using a different password on every different service so you don't have a single point of failure. If somebody finds out your password on one, making sure you're secure about where you click, that you know where every single URL, web destination that people have shared with you leads. And don't be clicking on random things in emails that you get supposedly from the service. If you have a question, pick up the phone and call or contact them through their official website channels. Don't trust what's in the email or the message you get online.
Finally, for these companies that have these breaches, you know, you heard earlier Burger King, for example's Twitter account got hacked. You know, how big of a deal is it for corporations around the world to protecting their own infrastructure? Because on one hand, they say they're doing a lot, but on the other hand, every time we report on these news articles, it seems like the hackers have it fairly easy. They can get into anywhere, anytime they want.
Well, it's hugely important from the corporate perspective. Breaches can cost them millions upon millions of dollars. But the bigger issue is in terms of consumer goodwill and lost trust. Oftentimes, shoppers feel very betrayed. But the problem is, from the perspective of corporations, you have to keep your systems updated, secure, make sure you have the latest security measures in place. But it's always a race that you're running with hackers. And oftentimes, they can seem to be one step ahead. The issue is, no matter how secure the system, when somebody calls up, gets somebody on the wrong day, they're having a bad day, says the right word in the right ear, there's that human error element that you have to be aware of as well. So there are potential security breaches, and no matter how well protected the system, unless you've cordoned off specific aspects, if I break into one piece of it, the question is, can I get into another? You know, it's hard to make them totally secure.
Scott Steinburg, thank you for the advice.